Zephyr 9 adjusted his optical sensors as he settled into the observation pod, his crystalline form reflecting the pale blue light of the monitoring station. As a member of the Galactic Council's intelligence division, he had witnessed countless species engage in warfare, but humans remained an enigma that demanded study. The assignment seemed routine enough. The Council needed data on human combat effectiveness before deciding whether to invite them into the galactic community or classify them as a threat requiring containment. Zephyr's species, the Veiltar, were renowned for their analytical minds and emotional detachment, making them perfect observers for such delicate missions. Below him, the human settlement of New Geneva sprawled across the valley floor of Kepler 442b. The humans had established this colony only 3 standard cycles ago, yet their agricultural domes and defensive structures already showed remarkable efficiency. Zephyr made notes in his crystalline memory banks, documenting their rapid adaptation to an alien world. The Korthak invasion fleet had been carefully selected for this test. A minor raiding species known for their brutality but limited tactical thinking, they would provide adequate pressure to observe human responses without completely overwhelming the settlement. The Council's calculations indicated a 73% probability that the humans would surrender after minimal resistance, allowing for capture and study of their command structure. Zephyr watched through his sensors as the Korthak dropships descended like metallic rain upon the unsuspecting colony. Their timing was perfect, striking during the settlement's rest cycle when defensive readiness would be at its lowest. The reptilian warriors poured from their vessels with characteristic savagery, their scaled hides gleaming in the twin suns' light as they charged toward the outer perimeter. The first human response surprised him. Instead of panic or immediate surrender, the colonists moved with practiced precision. Emergency sirens wailed across the settlement as defensive positions that had seemed like simple agricultural equipment transformed into fortified bunkers. What Zephyr had cataloged as irrigation systems revealed themselves as carefully disguised weapon emplacements. A human female emerged from the central command dome, her voice carrying clearly across the communication channels that Zephyr monitored. "This is Colonel Sarah Chun to all defensive positions. Remember your training. These bastards picked the wrong settlement to mess with." The profanity struck Zephyr as oddly confidence-building rather than unprofessional. Human emotional regulation during crisis situations differed significantly from other species he had observed. Where most civilized races would issue formal tactical directives, this human leader seemed to be deliberately invoking aggression in her subordinates. The Korthak reached the outer perimeter and immediately encountered the humans' first surprise. Hidden mines erupted in precise sequences, channeling the attackers into predetermined kill zones. Zephyr noted how the explosions weren't random, but formed a pattern that forced the Korthak into specific approach routes. What followed challenged everything in Zephyr's database about human military capabilities. The colonists, who intelligence reports indicated were primarily farmers, engineers, and scientists, fought with the coordination of seasoned warriors. They used their knowledge of local terrain to devastating effect, turning every building, every piece of equipment into part of their defensive network. A group of Korthak broke through the perimeter near the eastern agricultural sector. Zephyr focused his sensors on the engagement, expecting to see the humans retreat or call for evacuation. Instead, he witnessed something that would haunt his analytical processes for cycles to come. 3 humans, including what appeared to be an elderly maintenance technician, held their ground against 12 Korthak warriors. The humans moved with impossible synchronization, covering each other's movements while laying down overlapping fields of fire. When one human's weapon ran dry, another immediately filled the gap while the first reloaded with mechanical efficiency. The elderly technician, a man whose personnel file indicated he was a retired teacher named Marcus Webb, grabbed an improvised explosive device and charged directly into the Korthak formation. His final transmission echoed across the battlefield. "For my grandchildren back on Earth." The explosion eliminated 6 Korthak warriors and allowed the remaining humans to regroup. Zephyr's emotional dampeners struggled to process what he had witnessed. The human had deliberately sacrificed his life, not for strategic advantage, but for beings who existed light years away and would never know of his actions. As the first day of fighting concluded, Zephyr reviewed his observations with growing unease. The humans had not only held their ground against superior numbers, but had systematically destroyed 3 Korthak assault groups while suffering minimal casualties themselves. Their tactics showed creativity and adaptability that exceeded all projections. More disturbing was their apparent willingness to die for abstract concepts like honor, duty, and the protection of others. Such behavior violated basic survival imperatives that governed all known intelligent life. Zephyr found himself questioning not just the Council's assessment of human capabilities, but the fundamental assumptions underlying galactic civilization itself. The Korthak regrouped for their next assault as twin suns set over the battlefield, unaware that they faced an enemy unlike any in their experience. The second day brought revelations that shattered Zephyr's understanding of warfare itself. The Korthak commander, Scar the Bone Crusher, had called for reinforcements after losing nearly half his initial assault force. The additional troops that arrived should have overwhelmed the human settlement within hours. Instead, Zephyr watched in growing amazement as the humans adapted their tactics overnight. They had somehow transformed their defeat of the previous day's attacks into intelligence about Korthak weaknesses. Every subsequent assault met with countermeasures that seemed specifically designed to exploit the reptilian warriors' biological and tactical limitations. Colonel Chun stood atop the central command dome, her battle-worn armor reflecting the morning light as she coordinated her forces with calm precision. Through intercepted communications, Zephyr heard her addressing her troops with a mixture of tactical instruction and emotional inspiration that seemed to energize rather than distract them. Listen up, people. We've learned that these lizards have poor night vision and rely heavily on thermal imaging. Dr. Nakamura's team has rigged reflective panels throughout sectors 7 and 9. When they charge tonight, we're going to give them the light show of their lives. Zephyr processed this information with growing alarm. The humans weren't just fighting. They were learning, adapting, and improving with each engagement. Such rapid tactical evolution typically required species-level genetic modifications or cybernetic enhancement. Yet these appear to be unaugmented humans displaying natural capabilities. The day's fighting proved even more devastating for the Korthak forces. The humans had transformed their settlement into a maze of false targets, hidden passages, and interlocking fields of fire. They used improvised weapons created from mining equipment and agricultural tools with deadly effectiveness. What disturbed Zephyr most was witnessing individual human acts of impossible courage. A young engineer named Katie Morrison crawled through enemy fire to repair a damaged sensor array, spending 4 hours in an exposed position while Korthak snipers tried to eliminate her. When asked later why she risked her life for a piece of equipment, she simply replied, "Because my team needed those sensors to keep everyone safe." The concept of self-sacrifice for group benefit wasn't unknown in galactic civilization, but humans seemed to take it to extremes that defied logical analysis. They would endanger themselves not just for family members or direct genetic relatives, but for complete strangers, abstract ideals, and even future generations they would never meet. As the Korthak launched their evening assault, Zephyr witnessed the humans' adaptation capabilities in full display. Dr. Nakamura's reflective panels created a disorienting light show that confused the attackers' thermal vision, while hidden speakers projected false audio signatures that led entire Korthak squads into carefully prepared ambush zones. The humans had also begun psychological warfare that seemed to unnerve their attackers. They played recordings of Earth predators throughout the night, the sounds of wolves and large cats creating an atmosphere of menace that affected the Korthak despite their warrior culture. More unsettling were the human voices that echoed across the battlefield, not screaming in pain or fear, but singing. Zephyr's audio sensors picked up what his database identified as battle hymns and resistance songs from human history. The colonists sang while they fought, their voices creating an eerie harmony that seemed to coordinate their movements while simultaneously demoralizing their enemies. The Battle of Thermopylae, the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, the defense of Stalingrad. References to these historical events peppered human communications as they drew inspiration from their species' long history of defiant stands against overwhelming odds. Zephyr realized that every human carried within their cultural memory thousands of examples of their ancestors choosing death over surrender. By the third day's dawn, Korthak morale had begun to crack. Scar the Bone Crusher found himself commanding a demoralized force that had expected easy conquest, but instead faced an enemy that seemed to grow stronger with each passing hour. His warriors whispered among themselves about the humans' unnatural resilience and their disturbing willingness to die for causes beyond immediate survival. Zephyr documented everything with growing unease. The humans hadn't just survived the initial assault. They had turned the tables so completely that the Korthak were now the ones fighting for survival. The settlement's defenses had evolved from desperate improvisation to sophisticated warfare that would have impressed the galaxy's most advanced military strategists. What truly alarmed Zephyr was observing how the humans treated their prisoners. Rather than executing captured Korthak or subjecting them to torture as galactic warfare conventions expected, the humans provided medical treatment and attempted communication. They seemed genuinely interested in understanding their enemies rather than simply defeating them. This behavior violated every logical principle of conflict resolution. Showing mercy to an enemy during active warfare should have been seen as weakness. Yet somehow the humans maintained their tactical advantage while demonstrating what they called humanitarian principles. It suggested a level of confident strength that bordered on the incomprehensible. As Zephyr prepared his daily report to the Council, he found himself struggling to categorize what he had observed. The humans displayed capabilities that exceeded their technological level, tactical awareness that surpassed their military experience, and a psychological resilience that defied all known models of sapient behavior. The Korthak would mount one final assault, but Zephyr already suspected the outcome. These humans weren't just another species to be cataloged and assessed. They represented something entirely new in galactic civilization, something that would force a fundamental reevaluation of everything the Council thought it knew about warfare, courage, and the nature of intelligent life itself. The fourth day shattered every assumption Zephyr had ever held about the nature of intelligent warfare. The Korthak had received massive reinforcements during the night, tripling their numerical advantage. Yet the humans not only held their ground but began launching counterattacks that defied all military logic. Zephyr watched in fascination as Colonel Chun stood before a holographic tactical display. Her command staff gathered around her in what appeared to be a democratic discussion rather than a hierarchical briefing. The humans debated strategy openly, with junior officers freely contradicting their superiors and offering alternative suggestions. The Korthak expect us to turtle up and wait for rescue, Chun explained to her team. But that's not how humans fight. We don't wait for someone else to save us. We save ourselves, and we save each other. What followed was the most audacious military operation Zephyr had ever witnessed. Rather than maintaining their defensive positions, the humans launched a coordinated assault against the Korthak Command Center, using nothing more than improvised vehicles, mining equipment, and an absolutely reckless disregard for their own safety. The attack began with Dr. Nakamura's engineering team ramming explosive-laden ground vehicles into the Korthak perimeter defenses. The humans piloting these makeshift weapons sang as they drove towards certain death, their voices broadcast across the battlefield as they turned their final moments into rallying cries for their comrades. Zephyr's sensors detected elevated stress hormones in the human attackers, but rather than impeding their performance, these biochemical changes seemed to enhance their capabilities. Adrenaline, cortisol, and other compounds that should have caused panic instead triggered what his database could only categorize as berserker protocols, a combat state where pain tolerance increased while tactical awareness remained mysteriously intact. The most disturbing aspect was how the humans incorporated their fallen comrades into ongoing strategy. When Private Martinez was killed while clearing a Korthak bunker, his squad mates didn't retreat or mourn. Instead, they used his body's position to determine the angle of enemy fire, then flanked the position with mechanical precision. Martinez showed us where they are, his squad leader reported matter-of-factly. We'll make sure he didn't die for nothing. This attitude toward death violated every sapient survival instinct Zephyr understood. The humans treated fallen comrades not as losses to be mourned, but as sources of tactical intelligence. They seemed to view their own mortality as simply another tool in their strategic arsenal. The breakthrough came when a team of human teenagers, barely old enough for military service by galactic standards, infiltrated the Korthak command structure using a combination of stealth technology and psychological manipulation that impressed even Zephyr's analytical mind. Led by an 18-year-old named Alex Thompson, the team had disguised themselves as Korthak wounded, using alien blood and battle damage to fool the reptilian guards. They spent 6 hours crawling through enemy positions, gathering intelligence, and placing explosives with patient precision that would have challenged veteran Special Forces operatives. When the charges detonated, they eliminated not just the command center, but the Korthak communication network, leaving their forces scattered and leaderless across the battlefield. The humans immediately capitalized on this advantage, launching simultaneous attacks from multiple directions that drove the invaders into full retreat. But what happened next challenged Zephyr's understanding of human nature even more profoundly. As Korthak forces fled in disorder, the humans could have pursued and eliminated them entirely. Instead, Colonel Chun ordered her forces to provide escape corridors, allowing the defeated enemy to withdraw with minimal additional casualties. "We're not murderers," she explained when questioned by her staff. "We're humans. We fight when we have to, but we don't slaughter beings who are no longer a threat." This decision violated every principle of military doctrine Zephyr knew. Allowing a defeated enemy to escape meant they could regroup, reinforce, and attack again. Yet the humans seemed more concerned with maintaining their moral principles than achieving tactical advantages. The human medical teams immediately began treating wounded Korthak alongside their own casualties, sharing precious medical supplies with beings who had been trying to kill them hours earlier. They offered food and water to prisoners, attempted to communicate through translation software, and expressed genuine curiosity about Korthak culture and biology. Zephyr found this behavior more unsettling than their combat effectiveness. The humans could transform from deadly warriors to compassionate healers within minutes, switching between extreme violence and remarkable mercy with an emotional flexibility that seemed impossible. As evening fell over the battlefield, the humans began an activity that Zephyr's database couldn't classify. They gathered in small groups to share stories about their fallen comrades, combining grief with celebration in a ritual they called Remembering the Fallen. They laughed while they cried, told jokes about the dead while honoring their sacrifices. The complexity of human emotional processing exceeded anything in Zephyr's experience. They could simultaneously hold contradictory feelings, maintain hope during desperate circumstances, and find meaning in meaningless suffering. These capabilities suggested psychological resilience that bordered on supernatural. During the night, Zephyr intercepted human communications as they planned for potential future attacks. Rather than focusing solely on defensive preparations, they discussed improvements to their agricultural systems, educational programs for their children, and long-term terraforming projects. Even while surrounded by evidence of war's devastation, the humans maintained focus on creation, growth, and the future. They planned for tomorrow while fighting for today, balancing immediate survival needs with long-term civilization building in ways that suggested remarkable confidence in their eventual victory. As Zephyr compiled his observations, one fact became undeniably clear. Humanity represented something unprecedented in galactic civilization. They combined technological adaptability with psychological resilience, tactical brilliance with moral complexity, and individual courage with collective wisdom in ways that defied all existing models of sapient behavior. The fifth day brought revelations that would haunt Zephyr for the rest of his existence. The Korthak had withdrawn, but instead of celebrating victory, the humans immediately began analyzing their own performance with a critical intensity that suggested they viewed the battle as merely a learning experience. Colonel Chun convened what she called an after-action review, where every decision, every casualty, and every tactical choice was examined with brutal honesty. Zephyr listened in amazement as human soldiers criticized their own commanders, suggested improvements to their strategies, and took personal responsibility for mistakes that would have been blamed on circumstance by any other species. "We lost 3 good people yesterday because I underestimated the Korthak thermal imaging capabilities," admitted Lieutenant Park, a young officer who had led one of the counterattacks. "That's on me, and I need to do better." This willingness to accept blame for decisions made under impossible pressure seemed to be a fundamental aspect of human psychology. They didn't seek scapegoats or external explanations for their failures. Instead, they treated every setback as a source of information for future improvement. But what disturbed Zephyr most deeply emerged during his analysis of human combat footage. Frame-by-frame examination revealed patterns that challenged his understanding of individual consciousness and collective behavior. The humans didn't just coordinate their actions. They seemed to achieve moments of telepathic-level synchronization that allowed for tactical responses faster than neural communication should permit. During one critical engagement, a squad of 6 humans had simultaneously shifted their positions to counter a Korthak flanking maneuver without any apparent communication. Zephyr reviewed the footage countless times, searching for missed radio chatter, hand signals, or other coordination methods. He found none. The humans appeared to be operating on some level of collective intuition that allowed them to anticipate each other's actions with impossible precision. When questioned about this phenomenon, they described it simply as being part of a team, or knowing your people, treating extraordinary tactical coordination as if it were ordinary human behavior. Zephyr decided to test his observations by running probability analyses on human combat effectiveness. The results violated every mathematical model of warfare he possessed. Human units consistently performed beyond their theoretical capabilities, achieving tactical outcomes that required either technological advantages they didn't possess or levels of coordination that shouldn't exist among independent consciousness units. More disturbing was what Zephyr discovered when he analyzed human casualties. The humans who had died during the battle had done so in ways that maximized benefit to their comrades while minimizing damage to their unit effectiveness. It was as if each individual death had been calculated to preserve the group's overall combat capability. This wasn't conscious coordination, but something deeper, an instinctual understanding of how to sacrifice optimally for collective survival. The humans didn't consciously decide to die in tactically advantageous ways. They simply seemed naturally programmed to do so when circumstances demanded ultimate sacrifice. Zephyr's investigation led him to examine human historical records, searching for precedents that might explain their extraordinary combat behavior. What he found challenged everything the Galactic Council believed about the development of intelligent species. Human civilization had emerged not through the gradual peace and prosperity that characterized other sapient races, but through constant warfare against their environment, their predators, and each other. For millions of years, humans had survived ice ages, volcanic catastrophes, massive extinctions, and countless wars by developing psychological mechanisms that treated survival as a group effort rather than individual achievement. They had evolved not just intelligence, but what Zephyr could only describe as cooperative lethality, the ability to function as both individuals and as components of larger tactical organisms. This explained their simultaneous capacity for remarkable individual courage and extraordinary collective coordination. The historical records revealed even more disturbing patterns. Humans routinely faced impossible odds not just in warfare, but in exploration, scientific advancement, and cultural development. They seemed psychologically incapable of accepting limitations, treating every obstacle as a challenge to be overcome rather than a boundary to be respected. Their legends celebrated individuals who died attempting impossible tasks. Their heroes were people who chose certain death over acceptable compromise. Their cultural narratives consistently promoted the idea that some causes were worth dying for, some principles were worth any sacrifice, and some challenges demanded to be confronted regardless of survival probability. This explained why the Korthak invasion had failed so completely. The reptilian warriors were fighting for conquest, territory, and resource acquisition, rational goals that could be abandoned when costs exceeded benefits. The humans were fighting for concepts like freedom, dignity, and the right to exist on their own terms, abstract ideals that became more valuable under pressure rather than less. Zephyr realized that the Galactic Council had fundamentally misunderstood the nature of the test. They had assumed that observing human combat capabilities would provide data about human military potential. Instead, they had revealed the existence of a species that didn't fit into any existing category of sapient life. Humans weren't just another intelligent race that could be incorporated into galactic civilization. They represented something entirely new, a species that combined individual consciousness with collective purpose, technological capability with psychological resilience, and rational thought with irrational courage in ways that made them potentially more dangerous than any known form of life. As Zephyr prepared to transmit his findings to the Council, he found himself facing an unprecedented crisis of analytical confidence. Every observation he had made suggested that humanity posed not just a military threat, but a philosophical challenge to the basic assumptions underlying galactic civilization. The humans didn't just fight differently. They thought differently, valued different things, and approached existence itself from perspectives that could transform or destroy everything the galaxy's older species had built over millions of years of careful development. For the first time in his existence, Zephyr began to question whether some knowledge was too dangerous to share. The final transmission would determine the fate of humanity and possibly the galaxy itself. Zephyr floated in his observation pod, his crystalline consciousness fracturing under the weight of what he had witnessed. The humans had departed New Geneva, but their impact on his analytical processes would endure forever. He had been instructed to provide a simple assessment. Could humans be safely integrated into galactic civilization? The answer should have been straightforward: a basic evaluation of technological capability, social organization, and military potential. Instead, Zephyr found himself confronting questions that challenged the foundation of everything he understood about intelligent life. The humans hadn't just defended their settlement. They had transformed it into something unprecedented. In the aftermath of battle, they had begun constructing memorials not just for their own fallen, but for the Korthak who had died attacking them. They created monuments that honored their enemies' courage while condemning their aggression, displaying moral complexity that exceeded anything in Zephyr's database. More disturbing was how they treated the knowledge gained from conflict. Rather than classifying their tactical innovations or restricting access to their combat techniques, the humans freely shared everything they had learned. They published detailed analyses of their own mistakes, created training materials based on their experiences, and transmitted their findings to other human settlements without encryption or security restrictions. This behavior violated every principle of strategic intelligence Zephyr understood. Successful military innovations should be protected, preserved as advantages over potential enemies. Yet humans seem to view knowledge as a resource that became more valuable when shared rather than hoarded. Colonel Chen's final report to Earth Command exemplified this incomprehensible attitude. She provided complete tactical breakdowns of human performance, detailed analyses of their psychological responses under pressure, and honest assessments of their technological limitations. She didn't glorify their victory or minimize their casualties. She treated the entire battle as educational material for humanity's collective improvement. We learned that we can survive anything the universe throws at us, Chun concluded in her transmission. But more importantly, we learned that survival isn't enough. We have to remain human while we fight, or victory becomes meaningless. This statement crystallized Zephyr's growing realization about what made humans truly dangerous. They didn't just fight to win. They fought to preserve abstract concepts like honor, dignity, and moral integrity. They would accept defeat rather than compromise their principles, choose death rather than abandon their values. Such behavior made them essentially unpredictable from a strategic standpoint. Rational actors could be manipulated, threatened, or bargained with because their actions followed logical patterns based on survival and benefit maximization. Humans operated according to internal moral frameworks that sometimes demanded choices contrary to their own interests. Zephyr's analysis revealed even more troubling implications. Humans didn't just apply these irrational moral standards to themselves. They attempted to impose them on others. Their treatment of Korthak prisoners, their efforts to communicate with enemies, their insistence on following ethical guidelines during warfare, all suggested a species that viewed their own values as universal principles rather than cultural preferences. This missionary aspect of human psychology posed unprecedented risks to galactic stability. If humans joined galactic civilization, they wouldn't simply integrate into existing structures. They would inevitably attempt to reform, improve, or revolutionize everything they encountered based on their moral convictions. The database searches Zephyr conducted revealed historical patterns that confirmed his fears. Wherever humans expanded, they brought not just technological innovation, but social transformation. They challenged existing power structures, questioned traditional authorities, and promoted concepts like individual rights, democratic governance, and universal equality that could destabilize civilizations that had maintained stability for millennia. Yet, Zephyr also discovered something that terrified him more than human moral crusading: human adaptability. The colonists on New Geneva had arrived as farmers, engineers, and scientists. Within days of facing military threat, they had transformed themselves into effective warriors without losing their essential humanity. This suggested that humans could become anything circumstances required while maintaining their core identity. They could be scientists, soldiers, diplomats, artists, or leaders as needed, switching between roles with psychological flexibility that other species required generations of specialized evolution to achieve. Zephyr realized that humanity represented the greatest threat the galaxy had ever faced, not because they were aggressive conquerors, but because they were irresistible improvers. They couldn't encounter a problem without trying to solve it, meet a challenge without attempting to overcome it, or observe injustice without working to correct it. If humanity joined galactic civilization, they would inevitably identify every flaw, inequality, and inefficiency in existing systems. They would propose solutions, volunteer for dangerous missions, and sacrifice themselves to implement improvements that other species were too cautious or too comfortable to attempt. The galaxy would never be the same. Ancient civilizations that had achieved stable mediocrity would be forced to confront human expectations of constant growth and improvement. Comfortable compromises with reality would become unacceptable when humans demonstrated that alternatives were possible through sufficient courage and determination. As Zephyr composed his final report, he faced a choice that would haunt him forever. He could report the truth, that humans were psychologically and morally incompatible with galactic civilization as it currently existed, and recommend containment or elimination. Or he could lie, omit critical data, and allow humanity to join the galaxy knowing that their presence would fundamentally transform everything. Both options terrified him. Destroying humanity would eliminate extraordinary potential for good, while violating the principles of justice and mercy the humans themselves had demonstrated. Allowing them to join would trigger changes so profound that galactic civilization might not survive the transformation. Zephyr made his decision with the weight of billions of lives hanging in the balance. He transmitted his report to the Galactic Council, knowing that his choice would echo through history regardless of which path he chose. The humans would learn the Council's decision soon enough. But Zephyr already knew that humanity's impact on the galaxy had begun the moment they chose to fight for their principles rather than surrender for their survival. He could only hope that the universe was ready for what they would become.